Bienvenidas a todas
Welcome, everyone, to this meeting for the 35th edition of the International Film Festival of Mar del Plata. My name is Cecilia Barnueva. I'm the artistic director of the festival, and within this series of talks that we organize, talks with the great masters of film that we usually organize throughout the festival in Mar del Plata, we talk to different filmmakers and figures of cinema. And this year, we are organizing them virtually. We have talked to Miranda July, Walter Hill, Rita Acevedo Gomez, Álvaro Serra, and today we have the great honor of meeting with Roberto Minervini. These talks are usually very special where the audience can establish a dialogue with the figures that visit us that have a trajectory that the festival has accompanied somehow. And as I said, this year the meetings are virtual. Those of you who are watching this talk can find it on YouTube on its original language or on Facebook with its English translation. This is thanks to the work of the team of interpreters of the festival. And I wanted to underline that these meetings be, that besides the efforts made by the Film Institute and the festival team, there are also other people that are working for this and make them possible. Among them, Michelle Jacques-Torilla, Lydia Stevens, Macarena Lopez, Marina Sensic, Lucrecia Mataro, and all of the technical and communications team. Thank you to everyone. In connection to the talk that we will have with Minervini right now, we also wanted to thank the support that we always have from different institutions, but specifically for this talk, we had the support of the Italian Institute of Culture. And we have its director, Donatella Canova, present here with us. We invite her to join us and to join us in the start of this talk. Welcome, Donatella. Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you very much. And good afternoon to everyone. It's obviously good afternoon to you, Roberto, who is the protagonist of this talk with the great masters. For us in the Italian Institute of Culture in Buenos Aires, it's a great honor and pleasure to be able to support the International Film Festival of Mar del Plata, where with Cecilia, we always try to cooperate and to have a presence of the Italian film that can join with its perspective, its voice, its vision to this selection that Cecilia and her team make every year around what is going on in the world of filmmaking at the global level. The presence of Roberto this evening makes us very happy. Of course, Roberto Minervini is, I would say, a product of Italy for the world. Roberto obviously has an Italian matrix that he later on developed and multiplied in other cultures, and especially a culture that he embraces and he takes with him, which is the Italian culture. His filmmaking, I would say, is also a reflection of this crossing of cultures and this ability of having a perspective that can be at the same time distant and close to us. And his films are a very good proof of this. I would say it's inscribed along the lines of Italian films, the attention to documentary, the attention to reality. I obviously don't want to go back to neorealism, but looking not so far back, Danilo Dolci's school, the great school of documentary that nowadays has very interesting representatives such as Roberto, but like also another American Italian, Jonas D'Artignano, with La Chambre. He created a very interesting work precisely with this very special way of using the camera and the cinematographic discourse. So, Roberto, we are here to support you. It's a huge pleasure to have you here with us tonight. And obviously, you are part of the things that the people that we want to see live here in Argentina. So let's hope that when it's possible, you can come down to Argentina and finish some of the projects that we briefly talked before. Maybe you'll have to change them a bit, but we are gladly waiting for you here. And congratulations for your work, honestly. And Cecilia, thank you for being a fan of your work. You have programmed, she has programmed all of your films in different editions of the festival. So it's a very interesting story that we have between Italy, Argentina, and the USA. Thank you very much. Thank you, Donatella. Thank you so much for your words, for all of your support. And as Donatella said, Roberto is one of the most interesting directors in current times. In this festival, we have been lucky to watch all of his films in different times through a retrospective and then through different programs in the competition as well. In his films, Roberto Minervini, we can see mainly commitment and freedom. These are two good words to describe his films. Welcome, Roberto Minervini, to the International Film Festival of Mar del Plata, where he is also a jury. So we are keeping you very close by this year. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cecilia, Donatella. Thank you, everyone. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to speak Spanish and see how it goes. And well, I'm very happy to be here. Yes, we are also very happy to have you here. We have been inviting you for many years, and we always have the joy to know that you have new films, and that's why you can't always come. We're always expecting what happens with your films to watch your latest film. But we've been lucky enough this year to be able to organize this meeting in this very special way. Now we are going to start establishing a dialogue and also receiving questions from the audience through Facebook or YouTube. So we will also have interactions with the audience. I was just saying that I was very happy about this meeting, and I was thinking about your films and how many of them are due to encounters that have originated in a certain encounter, many of them. Yes. My films, as Donatella was saying, I don't know if I'm a recycled Italian or second-hand Italian. I don't even remember my origins. Where did it all start? It's a long road behind me, and a very complex one, probably, through which I ended up making films, and films have always been and continue to be at the same time a narration about what I observe, or sometimes also a narration that has no clear beginning and a clear ending either, because it's always about the movement, right? And those narrations, those films that I make reflect a little bit my will of meeting people, of giving voice to people and communities to which I belong in a certain way, and also to look for my place, let's say, which is always a bit unclear. I'm always in some kind of limbo between belonging and not belonging. And that's why I'm like a human being that's always recycled secondhand. So I have a cultural luggage, a cultural background, let's say, that I can never have a support. I'm never comfortable where I am. In my films, there's always something very dynamic, sometimes a beginning that's kind of strange, but always dynamic. I always thought that maybe one of your films initiates the following one, and not only in connection to the trilogy or the first films, but always we have the feeling that there is a common thread, and part of your films would move from one project to the other. Yes, in that regard, I made it a joke, but it's maybe true. In that aspect, I'm talking about recycling. It's not something negative in the artistic or from the artistic point of view. An imitation or a recycling or the co-creation is something positive, and including other ideas or the transmutation of concepts, of episodes, something that's very circular. And that's what does that these films, these experiences are each and one of them the inheritor of something from the previous film and leaves something for the film that comes afterwards, but it's also a part of my own experience. I inherit, accumulate, steal experiences, knowledge. I appropriate remainders or words or leftovers, information, or from life itself, the essence of the existence of people, and I interpret that and I never forget about this. So it transforms me. So there's always a transformation of the film and the transformation of myself. That's the connection that you can see between my films. I see that in terms of transformation, permutation, recycling. I love the word recycling. Those works are permanently and inherently connected. Yes, yes, they are. And we can see that. We have the possibility to watch all of your films and to be able to share them with the festival. As that is something that we can see, we can sense. And we watch your films. Uh, we had Jury, one of the protagonists of your films. She was present at the Mar del Plata Film Festival, and she also won the award to Best Actor. What you're going to do for what you're going to do when the world is on fire. And I was thinking, how can you find these people? How do you meet these people? Well, I'm going to tell you, for everyone actually, what I thought is that there's something that I have to say because I'm going to because of the advantages of having this talk virtually. It's sort of a confession because I don't see everybody watching. I feel a bit more calm, more relaxed. And precisely because for me, those films are something frightening. It gives me a lot of fear to make films, and it's the way to transform that fear that depends a bit on the weight of the inheritance of responsibility, responsibility for the people that watches my film, for the people that lives in my films, and also fear is a bit the engine that drives my work. And in the case of Judy, I was thinking, living here in the south of the USA, I was thinking a lot about the issue of racism and in my position or my place within this discourse. So I decided finally, after 5 years about thinking on a film about what you're going to do, Well, I dared. I went to Louisiana, and I thought that the time had come to make a film about this racial divide. But I got really scared. I got really frightened because I always feel very small facing the ideas that I have, even, or the context where I set my mind to shoot. Judy and also the couple, Mark and Lisa from the previous film, they are the antidote for my fear. It's the people that I maybe even as a coward, I hide behind them. I asked Judy, please, you have to lead me in this journey because I have to trust you. I don't ask you to trust me, but I need you. I need you to make a film like this. I cannot make it alone on my own. I need you to lead me in this journey, that it's a journey that is too, I don't know, it's a high-speed journey and it's carrying. So I talking about the racial issue is not a minor thing. So I always have this feeling, this fear, whose antidote are the people that hold my hand and take me through this journey. Judy is one of them, and the result is not a film, but it's a trust, a friendship that goes very deep between me and the characters. It's like a cathartic relationship that we have established. Yes, we can sense that. And I was also wondering, in connection to that, in connection to this tension that there's always there, that is latent. Is it documentary? Is it fiction? Well, honestly, what it is these are films that talk about a situation or different situations that usually are situations that I thought look for answers but generate more questions also at the same time. That happens with your films, and I think that is the most beautiful thing that comes out of your films, the strongest point of your films, all the questions that they leave behind. And I was thinking whether you, as you build your films, as you build these stories that, yeah, or the characters that you accompany, is that something that you do with the characters, or if you portray them, you shoot them and the construction is done on your own in the editing box, or how is it you work around this?
It's interesting because I didn't think about doing documentaries, but neither did I think about doing fiction necessarily. I have my own ideas, my preconceived ideas. I have them here, as most people do with many authors. I have my own ideas. And it can be a character, a sequence, it can be visual, audiovisual, or conceptual. And these are ideas that are inherently fictional because they're part of my mindset. But then trying to translate that into something more real, trying to find material that maybe already exists so that my ideas are not fictionalized. Because the idea might be fictional, but the film will inevitably be a mirror of my ideas, which involve my own bias, because of course of my ideology and because of my cultural background. And therefore I try to find what there is in reality. That's what my background is. I try to see human material, but not just humans as in the persons, but also in the environment and the rooms. It's people and places. So I try to find what there is there, what I can find there. And I find an entire universe there. And people guide me towards the stories, and we start putting together like an algorithm in a way, because I go from one to the other, vertical, point A to point B to point C. If it's not B, it can be C or D, D1, D2, D3. So ultimately, I am the person, and I am a person who works in that way. And I always mean, you know, the foundations of programming, which is the algorithm if and else, yes, or if then something. So everything starts like that, if then else. And that works very well with my own fears, because, oh my God, if this happens, what will happen with the film? Where will this go? So if we do not have this alternative and everything fails, I go in that other direction. So I live in this constant, you know, word of alternatives. But to answer to your question, it's like a mountain that accumulates. It's a mountain of materials, and it's mountains and hundreds of hours. And they never revise this. And once again, I try to find antidotes so that I'm not too afraid. I have to coexist with fear, and it's a constant battle with fear. And of course, if I'm overwhelmed by fear, then I won't do any films. I will just go home and cry and weep. Yes, and I connect with a very childlike reality. So I have this mountain of material, and that's where I start putting together, you know, the sculpture together with my collaborator and with the editor, who is a very close friend of mine. And working with this close friend, I trust her, and sometimes she protects me, you know, she ensures that ultimately we can climb the mountain of material, and I don't know, have 90 minutes or a couple of hours with a narration. But despite the ideas that are generated at the beginning, everything is written and everything takes shape in the editing. I wanted to ask you one more thing in terms of the way in which you work, but also I kept thinking about what you said, that you're a programmer. And I was thinking in how you jumped from being a programmer to being a filmmaker. And also where reality is really the most difficult thing to control or to program. It's like a constant surprise. Well, first of all, yes, I was a disaster like a programmer. Just to make a long story short, but to describe a little bit my life, I was born in a workers' town, and I should have never gone to study, as I should have gone to work at the age of 14. But I chose otherwise. I chose to study, and the future at that time in the 80s was programming. So maybe I could, it was a very small town. So I started studying. But then I never wanted to study, so it was a disaster studying. But before I finished high school, yes, before I finished high school, I realized that there was something interesting there, and that programming was very interesting, and it was very dynamic. And I missed out on that occasion. I wasn't competent enough. I dropped out, but I couldn't work as a programmer. So I studied economics, and I was a disaster as well, studying economics. So the big jump, these were strange events in my life, but I was always very introverted, very shy. And I looked at the options. I looked at programming as an artistic outlet for me. And I kept looking for this outlet, this way of expressing myself. And I was trying to find that outlet to express myself, and ultimately would allow me to feel good about myself. And at the end of this road, I arrived at the world of photography. And photography was something I loved because I thought and I felt that photography was something impartial, and it was more of an impartial tool where I could have like a picture, like an image, and it wasn't necessarily an expression or a mirror of myself. And this was interesting for me, and I realized that photography is all about what you decide not to show. So there is like previous censorship, and that didn't make me feel fully comfortable. So that's where I got into photography in motion. I completely, I did this for 2 years, but then I stopped because you have to respect a certain language. And at the time, I didn't really like it. I dropped out. But then after a few years, I started again. But anyway, I know that it's very complicated. When I start saying jokes, it's because I'm embarrassed. But I tried to be a musician. I tried to be a singer. I tried to be a dancer, and I failed at all of those things. I tried to be a photographer. I wasn't fully convinced. And with the camera, I decided that people at least were somewhat interested in this. But if I had had another talent, maybe I would be singing or dancing. Would you have liked it more? Yes, it's more similar to my form of being. Yes, I'm more physical. I, I don't feel fully comfortable about certain things, and cinema for me, it's too much visibility. I like other things, but anyway, here I am. This is how I got to cinema, because I probably failed at everything else. And also because ultimately, when I arrived at cinema for the second time, I found a lot of freedom to do what I wanted to do. And it's very noticeable. I was thinking when you were saying that you don't want to have like, you don't want to be inside your head, but you want to be more like in a group or in a team, or maybe not being above anyone. But when you make your films, you also have a team of people that maybe you've worked with for many years, and you're the director, but there is also a synergy. Yes, there are no hierarchies. I mean, there is a division of roles and there are responsibilities. But what I'm most interested in when working with a certain group is that we really care about each other. It might seem sentimental, but for me, caring about each other means that we feel safe, that it's all right, that when we're together, things will be all right. We can be whoever we want and it's going to be all right. So that really, during the shoot, it really comes to life, all of those values. For example, there are many moments, and my collaborators know this, many moments where I say, maybe you don't understand what I'm saying, and I stop and I tell them I'm feeling very fragile. You have to all help me out. All of the collaborators, family members, friends who just dropped by, I really asked them all to help and to give me their opinion. And so this concept of really taking the fear out, I do it by asking people for help. So this is what really helps me, like, create this sensation of safety. And all the rest, the aspects of the film, all of this depends on this synergy and this intimacy. And true intimacy has to do with when you don't feel judged. I am a vulnerable person and I speak about this. I could not possibly put up with having this fear bottled up inside me. So that's why We are a very close group, very intimate group, but everyone participates in a very specific way. And you were talking about intimacy, and I was thinking about this conversation, and someone on Facebook was saying that Diego Romero and you are very unique in the way you film. And if you could tell how you achieve that level of intimacy, because it's something that probably comes through the screen. Well, these ideas and the way in which we work, there is an evolution, but there's also like a recycling of this. And this depends on two main factors. I will start by the last one because it's the most mundane, and it's our artistic sensitivity. It's more mundane as a concept, but we do have it. It's inherent to our idiosyncrasies, and we are who we are, especially Diego and I, because we share in a way the way in which we control the visual aspect. This is just one of them. The other one is the need. I used to work with a lack of resources, a lack of mediums, or a lack of means. So we've refined a methodology that allows us to save time and money. So one lens, one camera, never a tripod because we have to move quickly. And what else? So it's a very small team. And why am I interested in this flexible dynamic aspect? I remember my first film when we had to shoot because we had to. There was no preparation, nothing. I mean, there was no signal that will indicate when it's time. So you just have to go ahead and shoot. So it's a sensation of always being late, the sense of urgency. You know, the time is now. So we started refining this methodology, which allowed us to be very quick. And the most important condition is that I have to adapt my way of making films, my audiovisual vision, and the language that I used. I have to adapt it to the language of the characters, to their MO, to their needs. And that priority is really a top priority for me because it's something that I practically respect as a religion. The needs and the well-being of the character. We are at the service of the character. So the closeness and the intimacy are a need for me, a need that the characters have because they need to feel part of their environment, and they need to feel, once again, safe, that everything is all right. And that's my responsibility. So shooting people from close, from a very close distance throughout the years that I've shot, when you do that, they feel protected. And there is no invasion. On the contrary, there is like a partnership, a trust-based partnership in that closeness. And that takes a while. That's not something that happens overnight. But because of my experience and because of how I relate to them, that closeness strengthens the idea of complicity, of sharing a risk, of occupying the same space, and maybe suffering the same consequences. And we know what that means. You know, all of these things. You have to take the risk and share the risk as well. And that's why, for those three reasons, it is why we've refined and we've developed and even implemented a posture or a position towards cinema that is very close, very intimate, where there aren't many wide shots. There's a total lack of wide shots because it's not what the characters require. the closeness is an ever-present element. There is a constant closeness with the characters, yes, but there's also a strong connection between the characters and the place that they inhabit. There's something with the territory as well that is very strong. Yes, that is another element for sure of that safe space. I never take them out of their environment. And it's condition number 3 that I mentioned before. And it's to evaluate the conditions, you know, the light, and this is so that we can achieve a certain result. And right now, after 5 feature films together, we've decided that if there is not a visual coherence, then we will not shoot. So if we have ugly light, and which is not something that can emphasize or that cannot add value or that has no added value for the story, then we decide not to shoot directly or cancel that moment and turn off the camera and live in the moment. And if we don't turn on the camera, we decide to just have a beer. Yes, the moment will not be shot. It will be experienced. It will be lived, but it will not be filmed. And we do that. Yes, where things are happening, we go there, and if the conditions, if the light is really not suitable for shooting, then we just decide to go in and participate, but without our camera. And the same goes for sounds. And Bernato, who's a close collaborator for me, we sort of have that complicity. We know that if the camera stops rolling and something that is very important for the image, for the character. And so basically that's how we do it. The moment does not cease to exist. The experience does not cease to exist. The question is whether we will film it or not. But the substance, the matter doesn't change. We continue to live in that environment where we feel good.
How long do you usually spend, Roberto, living together, sharing, or just being there to make a film? Well, months. We usually shoot. Yeah, always. It's kind of like a, how do you call this? It's something that we do always. We always shoot in the summer for these 3 months. And we say this, well, because before, when I didn't have any money to make films, in the summer, people had less work. So I made films and they were cheaper to make. So we continue doing that, shooting always in the summer, the 3 months of the summer. And then if we have money, we start shooting earlier. I don't know, a couple of months in total. And in my last film, as we had the support of Ari, we could just grab the camera at any point, and we were shooting for a weekend or a week here and there in different points in time. So we shot for about 3 to 5 months. We shot for a long time. We do not shoot a lot during the day, but when we start shooting, we don't cut. So we create this environment where the act of shooting, of documenting, is something that becomes a constant. When the camera starts shooting, it never stops shooting until it stops recording, and it doesn't record again. There are exceptions in this process, of course. I repeat, the process is determined by the characters, not by us. But that's our idea, that's our concept. When we start shooting, we go into kind of a trance, and we start recording, and we start becoming humanoids. There's a boom camera, which are extensions of us. I have a question here from the audience. Is there any of the sequences in your film that is fiction? Well, I can reply with a question. Yes, I don't know, maybe, yes. I wonder, I ask myself, I would say yes. Well, fiction, that's something that has nothing to do, it doesn't exist, it has never existed ever in life of the character, well then no. But fiction as something generated not coming from what we have immediately in front of us, maybe a discussion, a catharsis, where we evaluate that it's maybe necessary to restage this scene or recreate the conditions and see what happens in the same conditions or similar conditions, as it could be a scene in a cemetery, as we saw in my last film, or a dialogue between two people in a caravan, like in the previous film. This is conditions that we recreate, not because we want to recreate, but let's see what comes up, and what comes up can be an exception. But that's an endless debate for me, whether it's fiction or not. So I can reply, as I said in the beginning, there are ideas that I generate, that I come up with. There are questions that I bring. What happens if we were all in this room tonight? And if we all sit with our beers and talk about the political situation of the USA today, what would happen? Well, that's something fictional, but also the essence of the scene that we're shooting is not fictional, but then it becomes fiction when we edit it. I don't want to be arrogant. That's how it works. There are elements of fictions because they have been caused by the will of the filmmaker. There is a top-down thing here. There's impositions by the filmmaker, and these impositions have a fictional element that do not belong to the characters, but then the essence is not fictional. So my answer is yes, there are elements of fiction. I think it's always worth wondering if fiction distorts reality. Well, I don't know. I mean, it does not distort reality for me. It allows reality to come up, to emerge, because maybe it would stay hidden otherwise. Fiction is a bit the spark. How do you call it in Spanish? The light, when you start a fire. The flame, yeah, something like that. What the thing that triggers a flame, a warm fire of reality. I was also thinking how your films resignify themselves somehow, because you work with reality, you watch them at a certain point, and then reality itself makes them update somehow, and you have different readings of them. And I was precisely thinking, as you were saying, the political reality in the US, what happened with George Floyd, you went back to your last film. Yes, very curious. Maybe the last, or at least last 4 films, I would say almost all of my film, 80% of my films, since I made only 5, it's always end up the shooting, or the films end with the sequence that ended the shooting. And the sequences are always unexpected. So I always wonder what would have happened, what would be of this film without this ending. For example, the last film, the Black Panthers and the police and the clash, and the previous film, there is a discussion, almost a confession between the two couples, and also a paramilitary act. Well, for those who have seen my films, maybe you know what I'm talking about, but it's curious how these things, despite you have maybe, or despite my intervention, that generate certain situations. For example, I decide to join the Panthers and to remain with the Panthers, and I walk with the Panthers to the police station. And despite all this, there's always something happening that's completely unexpected. And my films have always been strongly influenced by the reality that emerges and exists because of my intervention. So all of a sudden is like the missing part of the puzzle, the missing piece of the puzzle. There's always something that cannot be explained. What would have happened without my presence? Without your presence, people ask me, would have been this clash between the police and the Black Panthers? Well, I cannot answer that. All I can say is that the fact that I have intervened, that I've been there since morning, 4 or 5 hours before that the Black Panthers got there to protest, that I have had my own interaction with the police, that I had explained in my way what I was doing there, has generated something. It has influenced some way. Yes, I don't know if it's enriching or maybe it's contamination, it's pollution, but it influences what happens. And there's always something that emerges. And for me, it's fundamental, it's crucial, it's a quintessential part of my work to try to understand how I work. And always these very powerful sequences, they're always the closure of my films, the ending. Yes, as I end up my answers, I'm convinced that the role of the director is that you have to manage, not only observe reality, but also intervene to have this reality take shape. It's like a birth. We are talking about a birth, and I have to have the knowledge to intervene for this birth to happen, for something to come to life, for these sequences to become alive and healthy. And how was your connection with them after the films? How are your connections, your relationships with the characters and with the Black Panthers and different characters that come up in the other side after the films? How is that? Well, that's very important because maybe it's something that I didn't pay so much attention when I started with my first film. I was thinking, I don't know, maybe a journey that started in point A and ended in point B. But I realized right away that it was not going to be like that, because when I'm talking about catharsis and I'm used this very solemn and heavy word, so full of meaning, catharsis, intimacy, trust, mutual trust, well, that implies relationships that have nothing to do with the duration of the filmic existence. It goes beyond that, and that concerns me as a person because I shoot in places where I live. So those friendships, comfortable or awkward, simple or complex relationships, are still part of my life. There was a certain point in time in 2015 when I had a nervous breakdown, and I decided that maybe it was time to leave filmmaking aside and to move, because what have I done with my film, I thought, with my life? Maybe I didn't give that much relevance, or I didn't understand the consequences of making films in this way, assuming that responsibility is not only making a film with a certain integrity when you're editing. I don't even have to explain that. That's the easier challenge, the integrity, the characters. Yes, of course, but afterwards they want to beat me up to death, maybe. So the point is to continue that relationship that is complex, maybe antagonistic at times, that will last for a lifetime. I've been here for 10 years, and these populations that you see in the films are part of my life. But I worked out my nervous breakdown. I went through my existential crisis, and I realized that, I don't know if that gave me a lot of awards, but that is the feeling that I have. Those are my awards. The fact of having access not only to the lives of people, but also of appropriating the knowledge, their experiences. And I don't have any competitors or any skills to do that. I don't deserve those gifts, but that's the gift I had in my life. That's the essence of it. I know that the films are going to last longer than I, but that's good, because what do I care about myself? But what I can leave to my children is the knowledge that and the experiences that I inherited from these people. So, of course, these are relationships that last. And I'm connected to all of them, or not except of those who have died, because some of them have passed away this last years, but these people are truly part of my life. Yes, I was also thinking about fear, because you talked about having a lot of fear on one side, but also talking about how your films are always placed in areas or situations that are of high risk, or could be in a different place, a bit more comfortable, if you like, but you don't look for that with your films. I wanted to ask you about this. No, honestly, I don't know. I haven't found many places where I've had felt integrated and comfortable throughout my life. In Italy, I am from a small village, and in the village, I didn't want to be an operator or a worker. I studied what I didn't want to study. I went to Spain. I wanted to be a singer, but I ended up in a shop as a shop clerk. I went to the US for love, and I ended up being also an employee somewhere with a lot of anxiety. I started to make films. I didn't want to. I quit. Then I went to the Philippines to teach, but I didn't want to live there. So, and now I live in Texas. It's not very comfortable either. So I am very lucky. I am very lucky because life has never given me chances for, like the Americans say, to start with an ego trip, with a huge ego trip that you cannot step off anymore. And life has taught me to be quiet, to be calm, not to raise my voice, and to take everything seriously, to respect people and environments, and to be thankful always, because I could have ended up in a very different way. That's my experience, my life experience. I'm aging, I don't know. I don't want to go, I don't want to sit in the round table of people or belong in different contexts. I like my life like this because right now that I'm a father, I see that all in all, it's better to be humble, because at the end of the game, yes, I have made films, and I'm giving talks, but everything depended, I mean, it was offered, gifted to me by the characters, by the people that it doesn't have so much to do with me, but not so much. It's not, I mean, it's not to take it so heartfully. I mean, I've been talking to people that you met Judy in Argentina. I think everything worked out well. And it sometimes could be an obstacle, but I see it like that. Feeling comfortable, well, I feel comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's okay. Being comfortable, being awkward, because maybe I'm so scared of death, maybe that's the antidote, my fear, because I'm an atheist, so I am scared. I don't like the idea of dying at all, but being so uncomfortable, feeling so awkward, what I'm going to live here in Texas, I mean, I'm unlike anyone around me, so I'm not here to stay for another 150 years, so that's okay to feel awkward, to feel uncomfortable. You were saying a while ago about Judy. Oh, but before that, I wanted to ask you what kind of music you wanted to sing or you tried to sing. Yeah, it's punk rock. Yes, it's punk rock. And I was a punk rock singer. I screamed a lot. I had a band in Spain, one in Italy. Things didn't work out that well. It was okay, but it didn't put money in my pocket. But yes, I was a punk singer, and I like punk a lot. Obviously, I imagine that some people in Argentina are listening to this talk, and there's a powerful punk rock scene in Argentina, also in Italy. Well, not so much, actually. Italy is not a punk rock country. It's the country of Sanremo Festival. So I always like that kind of music. It's maybe the only music genre that expresses that blank rage. And I felt comfortable with that. And that's the voice of the white people, the white people's protest voice or protest music. That's punk rock. Well, that's it. Oh, I liked it throughout my life. I am still a punk rocker in the shower, only in the shower. But yeah, I would have liked that if I could have followed that career. I felt very comfortable being a punk rock singer. Well, maybe the moment will come again. Who knows? Who knows? Oh, party's about to end. I don't know. My body's not the same. My body aches, and my neck aches right now. I'm this talk, and I have a pain in the neck. It's difficult to be shaking your head in a stage at this age. You're no, I don't have the flexibility that Mick Jagger has. A while back, you said, and you mentioned Judy, and when she came down to Mar del Plata to the festival, and that she was able to express herself better because maybe you said that in your films you would allow that, not that you would allow that, but that happens actually. It doesn't even feel like a permission, or those are situations where characters that are there, the characters that are in the film, take the chance and to express themselves and to narrate themselves. Yes, of course. And there are authors that talk about that, that inspire me, both in photography. David Turnelin, which is a photographer that won the Pulitzer in the war. I started with him, he told me, but it's also my direct experience. It's not a matter of just leaving them a room to express themselves, but also they take that chance. And I don't know, it's not a control, but it's not something that I think I owe it to him, or maybe I have to thank Judy, talking about the last film, to the Mardi Gras Indians and to the Black Panthers that let me participate, and they took me seriously because they are aware that they are the story. They are the actors, or what drives the story. And what I do is to take all this material and do something that we call films, but it's about their experience. And as a director, I'm very aware that I am a speaker. I am the speaker for them. And the speaker is not the one, like the spokesman is not the one that gives them the freedom, is thankful. Thank you for letting me get into your life. It's like Judy should go to Mar del Plata without me. That would be much more natural in the film that the other way around, that I went and she didn't. I see it that way. Judy and the Black Panthers have traveled in representation of the film to festivals more than I, and I've had wonderful experiences with the film. I went to London, I was on a stage, it was me and 4 Black Panthers. There was no question for me, and people were talking about me and asking, what is this guy doing here? And they were replying for me. And I understood that's how it has to be, and that it has to be, that is like that. It doesn't, what I think is irrelevant. It is like this. There are stories. The main of the film is theirs. I just participate. I'm an appendix. I am the appendix. That's how I see it. I thought it was wonderful, but very emblematic, the fact that Judy went to Mar del Plata herself on her own, because I'm more worried when it's the other way around, when I go alone, like right now. That's why I can talk about filmmaker, my ideas, and my poems and music. Yes, about music, my fears, because I'm talking about my personal experience, but I cannot be here and lie and talk about how I gave them some room or how I put my lights and the camera. No, that would be a lie. That's why I use words like recycling and appropriation, because I think it's more honest to define it like that. I am recycling, I recycle myself, and I recycle other things.
I remember once that we had met the protagonists of the film once, and it was very moving to see the situation that was happening, but also because it's not very normal, like what you were saying, that in cinema, it's not just the word of the person who is directing, but also the person who is making and acting in the film. And there are a lot of controversial positions there. But even in these cases, or because of these situations, is that the case? Yes, let me tell you an anecdote about that. It has to do also with my answer. Yes, this dilemma between reality and fiction. It really depends on the point of view of the characters. Maybe they could say what is fiction and what is not for them. But it's like the family of my other film, when they were asking, this is the portrait of our lives. And that's the only thing that I'm interested in saying. But at a formal level, in terms of the language, you can talk with the director. But for us, it's the same if it's fiction or reality. That's more of an academic nature question. But if you want to ask me if it's fiction or reality, they should be the ones answering that question. Yes, because it has to do with their lives, and they're the ones who make that call. And that's what's most important, and that's what I do after the editing. As I sit down with the characters and they look at it and they also decide, you know, they say, I like this reflects me, this represents me, or this doesn't. In Cannes, when I opened my film, The Other Side, it was very well received. Yes, I was there in the first row, the applause, I saw the face of the people, they were applauding me, a lot of emotion, bravo, we love you. Okay, very well. And a person from a right-wing paramilitary force, yes, with a Texas hat, with a bullet in the hat. And he hugs me and he says, Roberto, what a great film. Thank you for making that film. I love you. And big hug. And so I see the same faces that, you know, are applauding, and they start looking at each other. And we were saying, who is this director? Yes, do you think it's him? Is it, but who, why is he hugging the paramilitary guy? It's like in English, it's missing the mark. It has nothing to do with anything. Yes, it doesn't have to do with which side you're on, but it has to do with the fact that the character was very satisfied with the portrait that we did of him. And cinema has to do with that. And the fact that the director will be somewhat in control, or the vision of the control, the value is kind of subordinate or is secondary to the significance of the work for the characters. The rest is just material for having a cup of coffee and talk, but it doesn't really affect things. Or the pioneer of hybrid cinema. I mean, this is a type of discourse that we can enjoy, but it's not really the essence of things. The fact that a right-wing paramilitary officer came and hugged me and told me that I had done a good portrait of him was what I'm most interested in. And it transcends the fact of whether it's a fiction or documentary. You know, documentaries obviously carry a lot of responsibility. You're telling the story, and fictional characters also have a responsibility in the film. And you have to assume that responsibility. That's in my perspective, right? And I was thinking about this and your idea of cinema, and also your action of making films, and I was wondering, what are the filmmakers that have had an influence on your work? Or maybe contemporary filmmakers with which you know, maybe you are waiting for them to put out a new film and that you follow. Yes, there are certain trends that have influenced me. Of course, Brazilian marginal films have had a strong influence on my work. Um, they had a very strong impact, and many Nelson Pereira dos Santos and a group of people who make films in Brazil um, during this time. Also Japanese filmmakers, but that in the past used a different kind of language, less hermetic language, and a very interesting approach to sexuality and the gender conflicts, and in an oppressive situations. And then there are several ones. I'm very inspired by young filmmakers in Italy, for example. Davide Maldi is a very good director from Lo Stato, and Alessandro Comodines as well. Well, these are all people that march to the beat of their own drum. Yes, and they're independent, and they don't see the results of their work, but they continue pushing forward, and they're very determined, and they do things their own way. I saw a documentary made by Carlos Corral. It's a film that will be soon in a festival, another contemporary voice, and which has roots in their own environment. They have powerful voices, many of them. And so this influence continues to be a strong one in my work. And there are many people that I'm very envious of, actually. Albert Serra is a very interesting voice right now. I don't think our films resemble, but I think he's an independent voice, and he likes to provoke, and that provocation is very important right now. It's that insubordination and the references, you know. Do you think your films are insubordinate? Well, it depends on how you measure it. If you measure it because of the reactions and the reaction of the system, they're predictable. Well, if you measure it from that perspective, maybe the idea, you know, of the ethics. I know certain documentarists have been offended by my films. And there are people who have not been able to solve that dilemma between fiction films and documentaries. So from that perspective, maybe yes, but that insubordination, yes, a punk rock insubordination, you know, it's quite strange, but punk rock from the beginning, you can maybe, I don't know, first you spit at the people, you know, in their face, and then you start singing. Maybe I would spit in someone's face. I should think about whom, but I haven't done it. And it might look like insubordinate films. I feel like I'm more of an insubordinate person more than my films. Because at the end of the day, there are people who are paying me, they're giving me money, and I have to deal with a lot of people. But I tend to be a more insubordinate human being. That's a good thing. They're asking about the punk filmmaker, the insubordinate punk filmmaker. They're asking, Roberto, whether you know how films are made in Argentina. If you know Argentina, and do you know how films are made in Argentina? Well, I don't know much about Argentine films. Well, I know enough to buy. So I bought a little apartment in Palermo 15 years ago and decided that I wanted to move there. I have friends there, very dear friends. So a person that I work with a lot is Lisandro Alonso. He's a person with an enormous sensitivity, very sensitive person, and I really care about him a lot. But really at the level of Argentine cinema as a whole, I can't really talk about that. But obviously the examples, I'm not going to repeat the most important. I mean, Lucrecia Martel, of course, but Lisandro is for sure a person who inspires me a lot because of the way in which he makes films. I mean, I know him as a person. I don't know him as a character, you know, or a famous person. I know him as a very sensitive, good person. I've had the opportunity to see what was being done, and he is very inspiring for me, this way of looking for catharsis. There is a political tone in these films because inevitably the political arena is mixed together with the personal one, without a doubt. So in a way, this is part of Argentine films where, you know, things are sort of combined. So there is like an interesting vulnerability. So it's not necessarily pretentious. And that's basically what I can say. I do feel that it's introspective, and I also believe he's a wonderful person. I agree. I agree completely. Your films are usually shot in the United States, and you probably get this question a lot, but have you thought about shooting in Italy? Yes, I think about it a lot. Yes. I don't know how honest I want to be. I'm going to be 70% honest. There are several problems about Italy. One of the main ones is what it means to be a man in Italy. I have trouble with that. My growth was very traumatic in that sense. I never fit into that patriarchal society where the definition and the separation between the sexes reflects, it is like a mirror of Adam and Eve, you know, women come from men, etc. And so that affects the way in which we relate to women. And I never felt comfortable there. I don't know how to say it in Spanish, but subjectivation, you know, this objectification of women is something that made me suffer a great deal. But what does it mean to suffer in Italy? For me, that meant to be emasculated, basically, is not to not be a man. And that made me very angry. I have my both sides. I have a very angry side, a person who likes trouble, you know, who looks for trouble, but then my other half is more sympathetic with others. And so I'm afraid that that short circuit and that schizophrenia inside of me, this dual personality, you know, is very symbolic. I don't want to have to face a whole idea of masculinity that I really do not like. So I don't know, that transcends cinema also, but it's like, I don't know if I want to go back to Italy to make a film there. I would need to live in that context, trust people there, and for them to take me down a road, the result of which will be a film. And I don't really feel like doing that. I'm not ready to do that. Maybe I never will. Do you have an upcoming film or a new project that you're working on? Yes. I have a project that makes me really scared because I really don't understand what I'm doing. Every day I wake up and say, what am I doing? And I will work with the people I know again, because it's the people who inhabit my films. And this is how I work with them. They're my friends. So I will probably work with some of them again. And I'm thinking about a story about insubordination of the soldiers, or the mission of those soldiers in the United States right after the Civil War. So it's a timepiece. I don't know how you film a timepiece. I have no idea, but we'll figure it out, I guess. So a little bit of disaster and a little bit of a time or a period piece. And I'm thinking about it. I'm working on it. I don't know how it will come about, but I'm thinking about that as my new film. But right now, I don't even know how I'm going to do it, which I think is a good start because, like I said, fear is the engine of my films. It's the driving force. So when I'm afraid, I lose control, and that's a good thing. Another question that they're asking is, which do you believe is the status of cinema language right now at the time of platforms and streaming and that in film festivals? Well, it's difficult to be insubordinate, provocative, or I don't know how you say it in Spanish. Yes, like well, that you throw bombs. It's difficult, I think, because the system is very well protected against insubordinates. And I've seen films that went nowhere. Sometimes I have new colleagues, new filmmakers, and so it's difficult. Yes, there are many barriers to entry. So ultimately, insubordinate films survive because of festivals. And if festivals follow a way of making films that flirts with the mainstream, which happens sometimes, and then it will be very difficult to remain independent, because that's the meaning of independent, right? So I don't know. This corporate language, well, it's a problem in my view, because if making films against the system is militant, it's activism, it's really a militant or an activism way of doing things. And it's not for everyone, of course. And people want to make films to express themselves, not necessarily um, in that sense. And it shouldn't be an act of activism. It should be just freedom of expression. And it's a little bit what is happening politically here. In the United States, protesting is a radical act. And it's not a radical act. It's just a way of protesting, just like of expressing yourself. So the serious problem is that they consider you an activist and an insubordinate. And like I was saying, I think I'm more insubordinate in my films, but the films that I make is insubordination because it doesn't settle for that. That's crazy. So I don't see it with good eyes, because the filmmakers who wish to use a different language, a different method, or send a different message, they call them activists. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it works that way. I think that kills freedom of expression. I'm here, I'm far away in Texas in the middle of nowhere, so it's different here, but at a personal level. but I mean, I'm very bored by films, but festivals like Mar del Plata, I find them very interesting, but we don't have to flatter each other. I do say it honestly, and I'm part of the jury. We need festivals like the Mar del Plata Festival. I mean, there's a type of cinema that survives thanks to these festivals, and that's no joke. It's survival, and festivals need to help us. And asking for the help, of the distributors, I don't know, to make different films, I don't know, it's complex. But like I said, we have to pursue, we have to continue, we need that insubordination, but think of insubordination as freedom of expression only. I'm sick and I refuse to accept or to hear those who are talking about my cinema as radical cinema.
Preguntan acá. No te enojes tampoco si te dicen.
Don't get mad, and don't get mad. Please don't get mad. They're asking here, where can we see your films, Roberto? And torrents, you can find them on the torrents. You can download them for free online, I guess. I haven't said this, but I have said it because the first ones are, well, I uploaded them. Where can you see them? Well, depending on where you are and who's asking this question, if you are from Argentina, I honestly don't know if you could have seen them before in Mar del Plata, but I don't know where you can find them if you're in Argentina. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I know in the US, yes, in the US, HBO just bought my last film because my last film talks about police violence, repression by the police, certain movements, protests here in the US. So as they just killed a few African Americans here, they bought the rights of the film because it's good for them to be connected to this kind of film, which is the law of business. It's not any kind of good or a funny thing for me. It makes no joke. It's been exhibited in several countries. If we were friends, I would transfer them to you, but maybe look for them online. You can find them for free, and you've uploaded them before. You uploaded them yourself. Yes, I saw a site where they have them, but I don't know. I don't know. Or wait until I die, because there is always, well, people die. It's not good to talk about death these days in Argentina, but wait until I die, and I'm sure they will edit a DVD box. They will edit a box or in memoriam or something like that. Well, we hope you don't die, because we hope that you can come down to Mar del Plata next edition. We will keep trying. If you've said yes in this virtual mode, we will keep trying to bring you physically here so that you can take part of the festival. And in the messages here on the chat box, we have, please come, show your films, and also have a punk rock concert in the festival meetings point. So maybe we can do a double move and organize everything, a film concert thing. It's maybe I can I stopped the making films for a while, and I started doing performances with my laptop. Well, maybe, why not? I would love that. I would love that. I would love to go there. I was making a film once, my lung collapsed, and there's always something that prevents me, stops me from going to Mar del Plata. We'll keep trying. If you see if you can come, we'll stop stealing time from your agenda, and thank you again for all your generosity and for sharing all of this with us. And thanks again. Thanks. This has been an edition of Resistance of the Festival, and having you by our side resisting too has been very important. Well, thank you very much too. And congratulations to the festival. I will be here connected tomorrow for the closing ceremony, and great luck to you all.
Vale.